The reverse housing crash of 2023 has just started. And today, an insider reveals the shocking truth behind this reverse housing crash. Joshua Smith is my friend. He is one of my mentors. He is a real estate coach. He is a realtor. He is an entrepreneur. He is a straight up badass. And I am very happy to have you on the show today, Josh.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun. Truly appreciate you having me. It's going to be an honor. It is an honor to be here, brother.
Thank you very much. Now, as you know, I was a stockbroker for damn near 20 years. I experienced every market dynamic change that happened. So I was there for the great financial crisis. In fact, when I started in 97, it was the Asian crisis, and then there was a Singapore crisis, and then there was numerous other crises that happened. I mean, Greece went bankrupt. I could go on and on about all the things that happened in the stock market. I talk about that a lot in the channel, but what I can't talk about, because I don't have the experience as a real estate professional, is I wasn't there when the market crashed in 2010. I was there when the stock market crashed in 06 and 07, and I can talk about that. But you were boots on the ground. You were doing big things and making it happen during the biggest, bubble crash, number one, but also the fear, the uncertainty. You were dealing with clients and then hedge funds and institutions at a very high level. What was it like then? And what do you think it's like now?
Yeah, a lot of similarities. A lot of if we look at historical events, whether it be recessions, depressions, they're always renaming these things. Pre-depressions, they were called panics. Then panic's too much of a freakish word, so let's call them depressions. Now let's call them recessions or the Great Recession, and now let's call them a soft landing, or whatever the hell they want to call it. But when we study these, it's like usually it typically is a different lead in to what breaks, the straw that breaks the camel's back. So it's not always the same exact thing that led to the implosion, if you will. But the result usually ends up being the same, and I'm seeing so many similarities right now to what we saw pre-great financial crisis, like meaning, the overly optimistic just view of where the market's at, the constant, it's not going to crash. The markets aren't going to crash. It's this, it's different this time. That's just something we hear over and over and over and over. And look, I don't, go ahead.
The rebuttal that I get is I have people telling me, well, Chris, you keep talking about the housing crash that's going to happen, but look, the stock market is damn near the all-time high. Look at where the S&P has gone. Look at the success the financial markets are having. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking to myself, they're driven by four companies. I mean, this is not really a massive financial market move. This is four companies that are in the tech space that laid off a ton of workers and did all kinds of things in their balance sheet to ensure that they have profitable blowout numbers. But I don't think that's real at all. But what I didn't do, and I should have, is I didn't really give enough background on who you are, because I don't know that my audience necessarily knows. But if you would, before you get into what we're about to talk about, just give a little bit more detail in terms of who you are, what you've done, and why you're my mentor.
Yeah, so I got into the real estate business at the age of 23 back in 2005, and in 2005's market was very similar to what we're experiencing now. More really like what we saw in 2021 and early 2022 before interest rates started going up. You'd have 100 people camping out to go out there and bid on one lot for a new build. Just massive demand. During that time, and then obviously we saw what followed that eventually. But was able to navigate that very successfully. And part of that was, man, I was young, jumping into a new business, new industry. It was like I was having to pull out a blank piece of paper and reinvent myself each and every day anyways. So I was trying to figure this thing out, and I didn't allow, because I was newer at that point, I didn't have bad habits. I didn't have my old ways that I was set in. I was so used to just learning and adapting, where when the market started to turn, it was very easy for me to shift from traditional sellers and traditional investors, traditional buyers, into working short sales. Next thing I know, I'm, getting in with 35 different banks and asset management institutions, listing all their foreclosures. So, got into that space for a long time, representing. I mean, I was the guy that have to go knock on the door and hand people their eviction papers. I've been at the door with sheriffs, guns drawn to remove people from their homes. I've had to confiscate and impound people's pets. And it was just, dude, it was a wild freaking world, man. Then to, working with hedge funds and a lot of the major institutions, all the way back through, then we saw that correction, a lot of traditional, and then through over the years now, it's been a combination of kind of all of the above, so being well-rounded, I think is really important. Because the real estate market's always good for somebody. Somebody's always buying, somebody's always selling. And when you know how to pivot and navigate those waters, then you can always capitalize on any of those opportunities that are at hand. But through that, yeah, I mean, I've created a very successful, I guess, if you will, local real estate business here in Phoenix. But in addition to that, that's expanded to other businesses that are attached to the real estate space. So I've got a software business with thousands of real estate professional clients all over US, all over Canada. I've got a nationwide coaching consulting company. I've got a nationwide franchising business too. So we have, over 114 franchises now all throughout the United States. So all day long, every day, I'm working with real estate professionals that are in the trenches, plus I'm still in the trenches out here with my own real estate business. So it's whether it's, working with the consumer that's looking to buy or sell, working with our investor clients, or working with other real estate professionals, all throughout North America, trying to build their businesses. So the nice thing about that, why I bring that up in, is I get a lot of insight to what's going on, not just on a local front, but all throughout the country, and as well as, up in Canada, which right now we're all experiencing essentially the same damn thing.
Yeah. So right now, I think a lot of people are feeling the wealth effect, right? There's a lot of people out there that feel wealthy. And I know there are people that are feeling financial distress, but I think many folks are kind of feeling very insulated and protected because they bought their home. They're in at 3%. They're in at 4%. I want to say the stat is 62 or 63% of homeowners are in under 3%. So right now, I'm seeing that there is a massive short supply of new listings that are coming onto the market, and those folks feel wealthy. So they're not feeling financial distress. They're sitting on a metric shit ton of equity, but yet there's less buyers, right? The higher mortgage interest rates go, there are less buyers that are out there shopping, which does not mean that the market is crashing. I mean, in my space, I just took a listing, and one of the potential clients said, "Hey, we're not in a seller's market." I said, "Well, maybe you think that we're not in a seller's market, but we've got 10 contracts on this house. So this house, we've created a market within a market. It is a seller's market." And we did set a record on that particular property. But each market is going to trade very differently. And so I'm starting to see a reverse crash type dynamic start to happen, right? I'm seeing, and what I mean by reverse crash is, I think we're at the start of a bubble that is going to be epic in proportion, because there have been so many different buyers out there that didn't qualify for loans in the past that are being made available to new products that are, I don't want to call them subprime because that's not the term that you're allowed to use anymore, but they certainly aren't the 20% down conventional loans. These are people who are probably maxed out on debt to income. They're getting in by the skin of their teeth, and yet home values continue to appreciate. We're getting a lesser quality creditor who's taking on the obligation. And all of this works as long as the music doesn't stop, right? So things are continuing to appreciate. The reverse crash is more like the start of a bubble, and people think this can go on forever. I don't believe that that is true. I don't believe that you believe that is true. But I was hoping that you would share some of the things that you see right now in the market that give you pause and that make you question the stability of where we're at today across the board.
Yeah, the first thing, when you said, okay, at some point the music has to stop. So what is the music? That's the first thing I look at right now. So the music is all this artificial economy, all this massive amounts of stimulus. And by stimulus, whether you want to reduce it and simplify it and call it money printing, but we're talking about monetization of debt and quantitative easing, and we'll just reduce that to a simplistic term of calling it money printing, even though that's maybe not the technical term here. But with that being said, if you look at from 2007 till today, I mean, that's been the game that we've been playing on at a magnitude of scale that we've never seen in recorded history as a country. To the extent where if things were done how they've always been done prior the great financial crisis, right now we'd actually be in a 16-year-long depression. We've had true GDP growth, about 1% negative year over year since that time frame, and it's all been made up through artificial stimulus. Fed growing their balance sheet, government growing their obviously government debt expansion, monetization of debt. And when I look at that's when we're speaking of the music. But then when I look at the debt market, I mean, we've never seen a debt crisis this size ever. I can't find any evidence in recorded history of any time, and we're experiencing at all levels when we're looking at government debt. And not just one of the differences between now and the great financial crisis is, during the great financial crisis, it was really a U.S. issue that the rest of the world felt. When you're the biggest economy, you go through a big severe recession, a deflationary recession like that, the rest of the world's going to feel it. This time around, this is a massive global problem. And we're kind of like the best, the best house in a shitty neighborhood, right? Like, yeah, I mean, as bad as our situation is, it's better than most. So then when we start looking at that, it's
we're the best leper in the leper colony.
Yeah, there you go. So when you got this infused global economy and you start paying attention to what's happening with China and what's happening with China's economy, and you start paying attention to just the demography issue that we're experiencing is a globe, is a planet. Meaning, okay, we have reversed with our global demography. Look at China as an example, the fastest aging civilization in recorded history. They have double the amount of 15-year-olds than they do 5-year-olds. They have more 80-year-olds than 70-year-olds. They have, so it's this inverted pyramid essentially across the whole world outside of like 4 countries that have a decently semi-healthy demography. So like, what is this going to do? What is that? And so all of those things, when you have each generation that continues to grow and expand, right? So when everybody's having more kids, more consumers, people consuming more goods and services, okay, you can get away with a very low, interest rate, cheap cost of capital when you have ongoing GDP, growth with that consumption. Well, that's now reversed for the first time in any of our lifetimes. That is now reversed, and all those things end up when you have less people consuming goods and services. Okay, that at some point becomes very deflationary. So this is why I don't buy necessarily into the supply and demand issue. Meaning that yes, right now we have a current supply issue of active listings on the market. But when I look at the number of actual human beings that live here in, just say, United States or North America, and you look at that with the total amount of rooftops that exist, dude, it's about 3 people per 1 rooftop, right? So it's not, we have a shortage of active listings, but it's not actually a shortage of real estate. And this is why you see in most areas the hesitancy to go out there and build a lot of new units, because they're like, look, man, we don't want to overbuild, because if you look at you got to know demography when it comes to this, but anyway, okay, at some point, like, how long can this continue to go on? And that's the thing that we don't know. I'm shocked it's went on this long, with just this propping up this system, right? But then from there, what I pay attention to is what are the lead indicators, that could impact this, people's ability to buy real estate, people's ability to sell real estate, people's ability to hold on to the real estate that they currently have. So I'm looking at these lead indicators, and when I say lead indicators, just I know you and I were talking about this earlier before we came on your podcast here, but just as to put this in context, in my market here in Phoenix, Arizona, the peak of the market during the great financial crisis, if we look at prior to that, the peak of the market was May of 2005. Then it was a 31-month slow unwind progression up until 2008, where things kind of started to fall off a cliff, if you will, with the liquidity crisis and Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers collapse. Then it was another 24 months before we hit market bottom. So when you do that calculation, it was a 55-month, a 31-month unwind until shit just went, fell off a cliff. Then another 24. So 55-month total from peak to bottom. So this isn't a quick thing. A lot of people are just paying attention to the now. Or people are saying that this thing could crash. I'm not seeing it right now. And they're just looking at now evidence. But what I like to pay attention to, again, is what are those lead indicators that show that could flip this situation around? So number one, I'm looking at, because at the end of the day, it's like at some point people may have to make the decision of, do I put food on the table or do I continue to pay my mortgage? Right. So number one, I'm looking at current debt. So when we look at, and again, corporate debt, government debt, all-time highs, levels that we've never seen before. But let's just look at consumer debt. So consumer debt, hands down, the highest it's ever been in recorded history. But then if we look at just what's happened in the last 12 months, so we've had a consumer debt increase by 7.5% in the last 12 months. So if we look at a year-over-year increase, that's amongst one of the largest consumer debt increases that we've ever seen in recorded history inside of our country. So because again, I'm looking at the shape of the consumer. Right. Like who, again, their ability to sell and buy real estate, which is what the vast majority of real estate is owned by. Because when people are like, oh, all these institutions now own all this real estate. Well, if we look at just investment owned single family attached units, it's only about 20% of them that are owned by these institutions. The other 80% are owned by regular, just people like you and I that, just buying a couple properties to add to, our wealth portfolio. And, so 80% are owned by just regular people, right? So looking again at the consumer. So now we've also reversed into record low savings rates. So, okay, well, I have no money in the bank or very little money in the bank. I've maxed out all my debt. If we look at revolving credit card debt, I mean, people are just barely hanging on, when it comes to just paying off the minimum interest rate, with that. Then, we look at other lead indicators. Okay. Like people talk about this time it's going to be different because loans have been done great. I know you were talking about that just a moment ago, but there's been a lot of subprime abuse and a lot of fraudulent loans that have been done in the auto market space. And recent, right? We're not talking 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, we're talking since COVID over the last couple of years, there's been massive abuse where they're allowing them to apply COVID stimulus, like money that didn't even exist could get applied to these loans, to the point right now where we're having the biggest really auto kind of implosion that we've seen in history right now taking place. So 20,000 daily car repos. And that is a very conservative number. The number's actually, so I'm rounding down with this number here. But with these repos that are happening with autos right now, banks right now are buying and have been. This has been a problem that's been going on for about 18 months now. They're going out there and buying big facilities, buying a lot of land to go out there and store these autos because they can't take them to auction to sell them. Because as soon as they do, they have to recognize that loss in their balance sheet. And there is bad of a situation because we're in a no deposit situation with these banks now. This whole fractional reserve, got to have 10% of deposits on hand. That shit sailed, right? Like now there's, almost zero reserve requirements. And I know the Fed's trying to fix some of this stuff, but it's like a little too late, right? So, all right. So then we've got the auto repo. You got 1 in 6 Americans right now that are struggling just to meet utility payments. We got about 10% of all commercial loans that exist right now in the marketplace that have to be refinanced and restructured within the next 18 months, which I don't know how they're possibly, the vast majority of that are going to be able to do that. So we're already starting to see an implosion in the commercial real estate space.
Well, so that's a good question. How are they going to do that? The government's going to have to backstop them and write another check.
Yeah.
Right. So you see the commercial market is just imploding. Right. So you've got these buildings that were, and I'm valuing them at 100 that are now selling for 20. You've got all types of institutional securitized products that are tied to them, pension funds, mutual funds, God knows what. I don't know what the exposure is, but there's 0% chance the government's going to let that too big to fail market fail, because if it does, then we're looking at France, like the rioting that's happening over there. There's no way that they would let that fail. So what does that bailout look like? It's trillion. It's with a T. It's trillions. So when you talk about the Treasury and what type of cash do they have on hand versus the unfunded liabilities that they have on hand, I mean, it is a complete disaster at some point. But how many checks can they write out? How big is the ledger?
Yeah. Well, and if we have fully switched to MMT, it could be infinite as long as they can control inflation, which seems to be the path that they've went to as far as our monetary system. It's been really interesting. And when I say sad, I'm giving my own personal ideology here because I don't like seeing it, because I believe that, free market capitalism is the best system that, it's not a perfect system, but the best system that we've seen created to lift people outside of poverty. And now it's, we're full on socialism. I mean, when we look at socialism for the rich, socialism for the poor. Yeah. It's kind of, quote unquote, a free market for capitalism for the middle class, but it's a rigged game, where it's at right now. So, and I will say that, look, I know a lot of people are like, oh, I hope this thing doesn't crash. I look at this as, dude, it's the decision of, do you want your dollar to be worth more or less? And you've got kids, I've got kids. It's like, man, if this continues, our kids aren't going to have those same opportunities that we have. I mean, this thing, in my opinion, needs to crash. I hope it does crash. Yeah, it's going to be painful, but the pains, if we don't deal with this situation long term, are going to be much worse. But regardless of what my opinion is on it, like, my opinion means nothing, right? I mean, like, my opinion of what I would like to see happen means nothing.
Sure.
But then going back to what we talked about, again, just paying attention to what the consumer, because a lot of people, I'm getting the argument that, well, loans are done much more solid. People have a lot more equity on their homes today, right? But life is 35% more expensive at a minimum today than it was 3 years ago in all aspects of life. And I'm not one that believes, and I see zero signs and evidence that inflation is truly slowing down, at least inflation on the essentials that we need to operate life. And if we just look at, the historical evidence of government, like, how do they get themselves out of a debt situation as they inflate their way out of it? This is why the government might be out there kind of competing against the Fed with the moves that the Fed is doing, because it's their only solution to reverse this, this debt that they have. Who knows?
Or they create $1 trillion coin, or a $1 trillion token, or multi-trillion dollar token. Who knows what they're going to do? But I don't put anything past them, and I don't believe any of the numbers. So right now we're talking. I don't know. I may be getting our interviews confused because we talked a little bit before this. But right now we've got the Fed out there. We've got the government talking about, we have the strongest economy and the strongest labor force than we've had in years. Now, I know that's not true. And I know the service sector has certainly that has rallied significantly from post-COVID, but that's a small subset of the market, and they're not treating unemployment the way they did in the past. So how do you see the employment numbers, and do you think they're real?
Well, are they, there's a lot of half truths, if you will, that take place. Like meaning, I'm not saying that the Fed is coming out when they're delivering us the payroll reports, that those reports are wrong. Because I mean, they are reported by ADP and your payroll companies out there. But what those numbers signify is just payroll reports. So what we're seeing right now is we have a record number of people in the United States having to go out and get second and third jobs just to sustain, just to get by. Like, again, we've already, like, the pressure cooker is on, man. Their savings is wiped out. They're getting maxed to the gills with debt. They're having to do everything they can to just provide essentials. And we're talking about, I'm talking about the masses, right? So, right. Obviously other people are in different situations, but what we're really witnessing right now is just the complete wipeout and destruction of the middle class. And it's been interesting. I've had so many of my long-term mentors that have been telling me this was coming for a lot of years, I didn't want to not believe them. I took them for their word. I just didn't think I would see it this soon, of these moves that are taking place here, but then when we look at that, okay, so we've got a record number of layoffs taking place in the white collar sector. So if I have let's just say $170,000 a year salary job, and now I've got to go get, so that's one payroll, right? So I lose that job. Now I've got to go get 3 other jobs, because those white collar jobs aren't being, re-added to the economy right now. So then I got to go at 3 other jobs just to meet my family's obligations. Well, that's counted now as 3 payrolls. So on a net gain, we gain 2 actual payrolls, right? So, and I just, encourage people to, like, get off the news and just go out there and have conversations with people in your community, and real conversations, like pull off the damn mask, check in with, like, how are you truly doing? How are you holding up in this situation? How are you, I was just having a conversation the other day with a lady at my bank. I'm opening up a savings account for my youngest son. And I was asking, because again, I'm trying to have as many conversations with many human beings, business owners, just people that live in our communities. And, so I'm just asking, I'm asking questions about, how many accounts are you seeing open, how many accounts are you seeing closed. I'm trying to get, bank intel out of her, but then I just started asking about how she is doing and how her family's holding up. And, so she started, the first time I'd met her, but she starts telling me that, her and her husband, so married, her husband works full-time, she works full-time. They have 1 young child. And she was like, man, we get on this conversation about inflation. She starts telling me how it's a challenge just to even take their kid to McDonald's. And I see, like, dude, like, when I go to even freaking Chili's, or not even a fancy restaurant. Now I've got 3 young kids, dude, it's $120 minimum for a place like that. Dude, we went to Chick-fil-A not too long ago. We were on the road and had just in a situation where we had to go through a drive through. My son, he had a trumpet concert or whatever. It was like, I don't know, 50, $60 for a family of 5 at Chick-fil-A, dude, right? So it amazes me when I look around, like, how are people affording life? Well, the reality is they're not. They're either getting second jobs, third jobs, or maxing out in debt. It's like, how long can this continue before things start to break? And then we start breaking this down. Like, one thing I'm really paying attention to right now is what's going on then with the investor side of things. So if we look at, you got 12 million vacant single family attached properties right now. So absentee owners, right? The vast majority of these are owned by boomers. So this is stuff that, I'm not just reading shit off a Zero Hedge, right? Like, this is things that we are actually physically seeing with conversations and having conversations with actual clients that we're going out there and helping their situations out with buying and selling real estate. With absentee owners, man, it's like, and I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. So I know Florida is kind of in the same boat where it's the mecca of, snowbirds and, whatnot. But we're just seeing, more so than any other time in my career where I'm seeing people are like, hey, yeah, I've been living this snowbird lifestyle, but now I have to pick one home. Yeah, they might be on, they might have that house paid free and clear, or they might have a low mortgage with a low interest rate, but property taxes are going up. Homeowners insurance is going up, labor costs, maintenance costs, everything is going, utilities, everything is going up, up and up and up. And when you're on a fixed income, that starts to hurt. Right. Well, then let's look at the investor side of it. So we'll break down, short-term vacation rentals versus long-term buy and holds. Okay. Short-term vacation rentals like Airbnb right now, lowest occupancy since inception of that company. Look at a market like mine where occupancy is down 52%. Now there's 1.3 million short-term rentals that exist right now in the United States. And about half of those were acquired since COVID. People jumped on that gravy train, jumped on that fad, started buying these. Well, now when you have occupancy rates down about 50%, well, their cash flows are just crushed. Dude, they're just getting murdered. And flipping those into long-term rentals is just not an option, because most of the areas that they're buying in these didn't have healthy cap rates for that model. And then you have certain cities like Dallas and a lot of these other cities that are starting to ban and outlaw short-term rentals, because of the rising crime around them and whatnot. So it's like, hey, man, and again, as a real estate professional, it's like, okay, I've got to go out there and identify who's in need of my services and develop strategies for those. So, man, we're having conversations with these, investors and landlords every single day, absentee owners every single day. Same thing with long-term buy and holds. So at 57 of the top 100 metros, you have rents now being suppressed, going down. So yeah, most markets prices are still going up, or at least stabilized or going up. But now we have rent rate suppression happening in most markets. Well, a lot of these landlords that bought these properties, unless they have an extremely healthy cap rate. But look at Blackrock. BlackRock's average cap rate of what they've been buying over the last 3 years is 3.5%. Well, BlackRock is not paying cash for these properties. They might be putting 20, 30% down, but they're getting a loan from the Fed. They have a direct line with the Fed. That's a floating rate. So when they go from an interest rate of 0.5% to 5.5%, whatever this ends up capping out at, okay, well that's put them into a negative cash flow situation already. But then you got increased property taxes, you got increased insurance, you got all of this. So even with our long-term buy and hold investors, man, like we are seeing so many of them, because like rents are down in my market just over 6% year to date. So they're feeling those pains, dude. So I'm looking at this. You got 17 million single family attached rentals throughout the country, 12 million vacant absentee owners, 1.3 million short-term rentals, plus with the average consumer feeling the squeeze. And the common thing I hear with regular, quote unquote consumer, meaning this is my home, I'm living in it, is, oh man, there's so much equity. People will just refi. All right, dude, if they maxed out their credit cards, if they already are having a difficult time affording life, how do you think they're going to be able to refi at a higher interest rate, make those payments? Number one, I doubt they'll qualify. Number two, they're going to be in that same situation. And now we're seeing like evictions here in my market, the highest that we've seen since the great financial crisis. So we're starting to see a lot of NODs, notice of defaults. Right now, almost 3% of all, if you look at all the mortgages in the United States, almost 3% of them right now currently are in at least 30 days or more delinquent.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could keep going on
Well,
and on about.
but I see that here in my market too. So bankruptcies in Florida are up 11% so far in 23 versus 2022, right? And there are something close to, this is all property types, almost, let's call it 6,000, I'm rounding up, 6,000 foreclosures that are happening right now in Palm Beach County. Now, that's just Palm Beach County. And if we were to look at it as in terms of total sales for the first part of this year, total sales are something close to, let's call it 125,000 sales in the state of Florida. Well, I remember it was only 10% of the market that was in distress that brought down the market by 30% on a national level. I'm just watching those numbers uptick, and none of those numbers are being reported yet from the Realtor Association. So if you were to go online and look at the FloridaRealtors.com, you'd see there is no distress sales. There is no there are no foreclosures. There are very few short sales, but I see the personal financial distress on the uptick big time. So one of the things that I'm excited about, and it's one of the things that I'm doing on Patreon, is I'm going out there and offering solutions to people who are in that financial distress that may be in those 3 or 4% or lower mortgage interest rates, and finding ways to buy their property on terms and create essentially an annuitized situation for them where they get to benefit. They don't get hurt. They don't take that financial loss. They don't get their credit score destroyed. And it's a win-win situation for both of us. Now, I don't know that I'm going to be the buyer for everybody, but being able to provide solutions for people who are feeling financial distress, I think, is a massive opportunity. And, we talked about this a little bit on your podcast, but I'm known for cold calling, and I haven't been excited to get on the phone for anything up until I realized that there is an opportunity here that nobody really seems to be aware of. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, you can't do that. That's not done. That's not done in this market. It can't happen now. Well, when I've got industry experts telling me that it can't be done, that's where I know there's a niche that's untapped that I'm going to go aggressively for. So if you're interested in learning more about that, then you got to join me on Patreon, because I go off. But I also want to point to Josh. This market that we're in right now, whether it's a good market, a bad market, a bull market, a bear market, if the shit hits the fan and the market were to go to zero, that would be, to me, the best opportunity to get involved in the real estate space that ever existed, because the opportunities that you can create when the market gets flushed out, I think, is just on a magnitude of scale that I've never seen. And that's really what you have helped so many people with. So what would you describe, or how could people get in touch with you to learn how to max out the opportunities that exist within the real estate space?
Yeah, just gsdmode.com is the best way. It's kind of the hub. So on there, you can connect with my YouTube channel, connect with me everywhere. So just gsdmode.com.
And I would tell everyone, Josh, first and foremost, is one of my mentors. I was ready to quit the business and get out of the real estate space when I found him, and he offered his blueprint and has been unbelievably valuable to me, my business, my team, and everyone around him. He is a constant giver. But please know, because I read the comments, there are a lot of folks out there that think that they are priced out of the market forever, that they are stuck in a dead-end job, that they will never make more money than they're currently making, and they're afraid of the financial possibilities that may lay ahead in the future. And what I would say is there is tremendous opportunity that exists out there if you are willing to do the work, if you're willing to level up. And certainly I'm happy to share that on Patreon in terms of me going out there and acquiring real estate with no cash, no credentials, and no credit. But Josh is the person the all-star in the space as it relates to excelling in the real estate market. So please reach out to him, because he is the best of the best.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the kind words, man. Truly means a lot, my friend.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm out. Peace.
All right. See ya.